Heavy rain in parts of Gaza is further complicating the dire humanitarian situation. Many are living in makeshift tents where basic supplies such as food, medicine and fuel are running dangerously low. The UN is warning of the looming threat of disease and starvation. The UN says 1 million Palestinians, that's nearly half the population of Gaza, are now sheltering near the southern city of Rafah. Well, reacting to growing calls for a ceasefire, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu vowed that the war against Hamas will continue until the group is annihilated. He made the comments during a visit to soldiers at a military base in southern Israel. The US has warned Israel that indiscriminate attacks on civilians in Gaza is costing the government international support. The U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan is in Israel for talks. He's been meeting the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in Tel Aviv. Earlier, Israel's defense minister told him that it would take more than a few months to dismantle Hamas. There have been growing signs of disagreement between Israel and its closest ally, the U.S., ahead of this visit. This week, President Biden blamed Israel's indiscriminate bombing of Gaza for a loss of global support for its war against Hamas.
The Hamas is a terror organization that built itself for a decade to fight Israel. And they build infrastructure under the ground and on the ground. And it is not easy to destroy them. It will take and require a long period of time. It will last more than several months, but we will win and we will destroy them.
And that's Yoav Gallant, who is Israel's defense minister there. Well, for the very latest on the war, let's cross live to the Israeli city of Tel Aviv and speak with our special correspondent, Karl Bostic. Good to see you, Karl. Let's start with that visit by the U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan in Israel, and presumably what he says in public and in private will be pretty significant.
That's right, Charles. I mean, this is he's had at least 3 visits to Israel. He's the advisor to President Biden, so he has the president's ear, and he's also coming with a message. The message being that there's a widening difference now between Israel and the U.S. There is common ground when it comes to increasing the flow of humanitarian aid. They're opening up a second crossing, at least for screening. The U.S. wants to have that crossing used for trucks to actually go through. That's the Kerem Sharon crossing. So that's a plus. There's also, talk about, minimizing casualties. They want that to happen, and that means using, less aerial bombardments, more ground offensive. That's why you had the high casualties yesterday. But the Gulf really widens when it comes to what does Gaza look like after the war. And so he comes asking for what are the timetables for winning the war. You have the defense minister saying it'll take months. And in fact, I heard an analyst this morning. He was saying that until the end of the year, before the war can conclude. But the intensive fighting that you see right now, Charles, the Israeli conservatively believes that would take at least until the end of January. We're talking about the aerial bombardments. They've already dropped 25,000 pounds right now. But it's the future of Gaza that there really is real wide differences. Very, very, very bluntly putting, despite the international outrage about what's going on, with increased UN votes against Israel calling for an immediate ceasefire. You have the foreign minister yesterday saying that Israel will go it alone with or without international support. That's coming from the foreign minister. And at the same time, you also have the Prime Minister Netanyahu saying there will be no future Gaza with a Palestinian Authority as a governing body. There's no way. And yet the White House wants the Palestinian Authority to be heavily involved. And as the Prime Minister Netanyahu said, we don't want a Hamastan or a Fatahstan, referring to the other Palestinian party. He says, if anything, he favors an Israeli occupation. So those are the differences right there. But tomorrow he'll be meeting with the Prime Minister Netanyahu, and we'll see if those differences have been narrowed.
And of course, Karl, this visit by Jake Sullivan is going to be followed by other high-level U.S. visits, isn't it? I mean, the chairman of the U.S. Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Brown, I understand, is arriving tomorrow. Then on Monday, the U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin will be in Israel. I mean, could all this be heading for a showdown with America?
It's a showdown. It's a collision course. But at the end of the day, U.S. is Israel's strongest partner, no matter what. So that's why you have the multiple visits. You have daily phone conversations, Charles. And I think what you'll see happening is maybe a new timetable coming out where they're talking about, really trying to aggressively end this bombardment, by sometime in January. To put things in perspective, Charles, you talked about, the suffering on the border of Rafah, with now 1 million there. This is Gaza Strip, a quarter the size of Abuja. Now it's the eighth of the size of Abuja, where 1 million people are on the border with Egypt. Egypt is very nervous and anxious about any attempts to breach that border, for example. But also, Charles, what's happened now, in the space of like 8 weeks or 9 weeks, you already have 40% of all buildings in Gaza damaged or destroyed, 60% in northern Gaza, not seen since the carpet bombing of Germany in the Second World War. So if anything, it's being made uninhabitable for anyone to even go back to, with 1 million people already on the Rafah border. And that's also the added concern about what's going on, why so much international outrage.
And meanwhile, of course, Israel not deviating from its military campaign. What's the latest as far as that is concerned?
Well, again, they're clearing out pockets of resistance in North Gaza. That's the Jabalia refugee camp. That's the Shujaiya camp, also in North Gaza. And then, of course, Khan Yunis. One thing I'll point out, Charles, and I'll try to be very quick in all of this, I want to share more information with you. Despite the scenes of destruction and devastation you're seeing above ground, Charles, you still have hundreds of miles of a vast network of tunnels underground. That's where Hamas is now thriving. So where it looks like they're defeated over ground, you actually have Hamas units moving, throughout the strip through these miles of tunnels. And that's why you had that ambush yesterday, because the fighters who took out those 10 soldiers yesterday, they came from another part of Gaza and they traveled underground. Charles, if I may, because I know your time is very tight, there's a new poll coming out. That's the most comprehensive poll about how Palestinians feel about this, from the Palestinian Center for Policy and Service Research. And basically, it's saying that the majority of Palestinians in West Bank and Gaza say they think Hamas made the right decision to attack Israel. 90% of those polls said they either did not know or did not believe that Hamas had committed atrocities against Israeli civilians on October 7th. In other words, also, we had 70% of the respondents in this poll saying that they did not believe that Israel would succeed in eradicating Hamas. That's between West Bank and Gaza. And 60% of the respondents, Charles, said they would support the dissolution of the Palestinian Authority, and 90% saying they want Mahmoud Abbas, the head of the Palestinian Authority, to resign. And Express for Armed Struggle, Charles, has actually gone up 10 points since the start of the war. And then finally, Charles, 1/3 of respondents said they supported a two-state solution. So, if the White House and the U.S. says, we want, a self-determining Palestinian Authority and self-determination, you can see the mood amongst Palestinians is really, really frightening for Israel, because Israel says we don't want a governing body coming out of Ramallah.
That's a very important footnote and vital information there. Thank you for bringing that to our attention. Our special correspondent there, Karl Bostic, talking to me from the Israeli city of Tel Aviv.